Hi. Okay, so we do have notes in our notebooks, but before we do that, I want to play this little game on Delta because it's going to help the lesson go better if you can really understand how to do this little X game is what it's called. So it says write two numbers that multiply to the value on top. So they multiply to 8 and add to the value on the bottom. So looking for two numbers that when you multiply them, it's 8, but when you add them, it's 9. So you think of factors of 8, 2 times 4, but if I add 2 and 4, I get 6, not 9. So the other way to make 8 would be 8 times 1, right? And 8 times 1 is 8, 8 plus 1 is 9. So those would be the correct numbers, 1 and 8 or 8 and 1, okay? Hopefully that makes some sense. All right, let's do another one. Ooh, you had a negative value. So we want two numbers that multiply to be negative 4. And when we add them up, it's positive 3. So first of all, let's talk about negative 4. If I'm timesing something, timesing two numbers, and it makes a negative, then what that means is one is positive and the other one is negative. Okay, that's the only way to make a negative. Positive times negative is negative. Okay, so 2 times 2 is 4, or in this case, 2 times negative 2. But if you add those up, that cancels a 0. So we want 3. So the other one is like 4 and 1, but one of those has to be a negative. Either the 4 has to be negative or the 1, but not both. Okay, so if we did positive 4 and negative 1, 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. 4 plus negative 1, same as 4 minus 1, and that's 3. So that works. Okay, whatever the next one is, I want you to pause the video and then hit play when you think you got it, okay? So multiplies to be 12, two numbers that multiply to be positive 12. But when you add them up, it's negative 8. Hit pause if you haven't already, try it out. Okay, try it out. So factors of 12, there's a lot. 4 times 3, 12 times 1, 6 times 2. And you can also, to make a positive number, you can do positive times positive, but you can also do a negative times a negative to equal a positive. Okay. So in this one, we're going to have to actually use two negative values just because I see that when I add them up, it's negative. Okay, if I put two positives right there, yeah, it could equal 12 when we multiply, but two positives added together does not make a negative. Okay, so 4 and 3, that's 7. So this would be 2 and 6. So negative 2 times negative 6 is positive 12, but negative 2 plus negative 6 is negative 8. Okay. So this is something that I will be assigning so that you get practice, but it's also this whole thinking is going to be helpful for when we do our lesson, which is next. Here we go. Okay, time for notes. So we are factoring quadratics today. I love factoring stuff. I think it's very satisfying, but I know that for some students with weak mental math skills, like maybe if I said, what are all the factors of 12, you might go, oh, I don't know. Okay, then this lesson could be a challenge. I like factoring because it's like figuring out a puzzle. Anyways, we could spend weeks on factoring, but really we only have just a few days. This is your last lesson. So we're just going to go with very basic factoring for quadratics. Quadratics, if you remember, are polynomials with a degree of 2. So their highest power would be like x squared in it. Okay. So let's write ourselves a little note right here just to get started. When you multiply two, TWO, binomials. Sorry for my handwriting. Whoops, binomials. When you multiply two binomials, and just maybe tell yourself or show yourself an example of two binomials right here. Like if we had x plus 3 multiplied by x minus 5, okay? That's two binomials being multiplied. Binomial because there's two terms multiplying by two terms, okay? When you multiply two binomials, you typically end up with a quadratic trinomial. You typically end up with a quadratic trinomial. Okay, so let me show you what I mean here. We're going to take this example that we got up there, x plus 3 times x minus 5. And you better remember how to do this. You just use FOIL. You could set up a box method if you really, really, really wanted to. I would suggest just doing FOIL though. X times x is x squared. X times 5, negative 5 is negative 5x. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. Okay. And then you go to combine your like terms. My negative 5x can go with the 3x. Negative 5 plus 3 is negative 2. So we would be left with x squared minus 2x minus 15. So what I'm saying is most of the time when you multiply two binomials together like this, you're going to end up with a quadratic trinomial. So 3 terms. And that's because after you multiply, you do have 4 terms right here, but you are going to have some like terms that end up combining. Okay. That's typically what happens. There is an exception, so we can show an exception to this. An exception would be if you were to multiply something like x plus 4, and then you do the opposite of plus 4 and you minus 4. These are opposites of each other. So what's going to happen is you're going to have something that cancels out completely, not just combines, but cancels out to 0. So let me show you that. X times x is x squared. X times negative 4 is negative 4x. 4 times x is 4x. 4 times negative 4 is negative 16. And then right here, your negative 4 plus 4, negative 4x plus 4x, that's 0x. So that just cancels out completely, right? So you're left with x squared minus 16. Now this is not a quadratic trinomial, it's a quadratic binomial. But either way, when you multiply two binomials like this, you're going to end up with a quadratic, whether it's a trinomial or binomial. So that's what we're factoring today. We are factoring things that look like this. Quadratic trinomials. We're sticking with that. So I keep mentioning this word factoring. How I want you to think of factoring quadratics specifically is I want you to tell yourself that factoring quadratics is basically just reverse FOIL. It's just reverse FOIL. Meaning, I'm going to give you something like this, and you're going to have to give me something like this. So it's like, I give you the answer, and you actually give me the starting point. Okay. Now you might be thinking, why? Why are we doing this? Learning how to factor quadratics is a huge part of algebra. And unfortunately, because of the school year, we just didn't have time to do a lot of it. So I at least want you to know just this part, okay? But this will help you solve quadratics in the future. That's the whole point of this. So what I mean is I'm gonna give you something like this: x squared minus 2x minus 15. That would be your starting point. So I'm gonna give you that to start. And then you will work some mathematical magic, and you'll figure out that, oh, that's just x plus 3 times x minus 5. Okay, so that will be your end or your answer. So that's the plan. The question is, how the heck do I get there, right? That's what I'm here to teach you today. So how to factor. Okay, so we're going to keep working with this guy. We already know it should end up as this. I'm going to show you how to get there. So on your paper, go ahead and write that quadratic: x squared minus 2x minus 15. Okay, remember that little x game that we played on Delta at the beginning of this lesson? This is where it comes in handy. So here's what we gotta do. We are trying to find, so go ahead and write this off to the side. We need to find two numbers that multiply to, and it's always, they need to multiply to this ending number right there, the last value, which is negative 15. So they need to multiply to negative 15, but they have to add to, and then you look at your middle term. The coefficient of your middle term is what they need to add to. So you have to add to negative 2. Okay, two numbers that when you multiply them up, it equals negative 15. But when you add them up, it equals negative 2. So here is what we got to start thinking about. We got to start thinking about factors of 15. Or in this case, not 15, negative 15. So let's be specific here, because that does definitely matter. Okay, so factors of negative 15. So in order for me to times two numbers and get a negative, one of them has to be negative, right? Because positive times positive is positive. Negative times negative is positive. So the only way to make a negative answer is to do a positive times a negative. Okay, one of them has to be positive, one of them has to be negative. So I know that I could multiply 15 and negative 1. 15 times negative 1 is 15, negative 15, okay? I could also switch that and do negative 15 times positive 1, right? That would also multiply up to negative 15, okay? Other factors of 15, 3 and 5 make 15. But once again, we have to make this equal negative 15 when we multiply. So let's say we did 3 and negative 5. Or the other option would be negative 3 and positive 5. Okay, so those are the only factors of 15 are 1, 3, 5, and 15. That's it. And in this case, one's got to be positive, one's got to be negative. And now what we're searching for is which one of these little matchups here adds to negative 2. So you could take your calculator and you could type in 15 plus negative 1, and you'd get 14. So if you want to add that off to the side, you can. When you add up these, you get 14. Negative 15 plus 1 is negative 14. 3 plus negative 5 is negative 2. Negative 3 plus 5 is positive 2. So we want them to add to negative 2. So that would be these guys right here, a positive 3 and a negative 5. Okay, So what you end up doing with those numbers is those get placed in your parentheses. You can see right here, okay? So I set up my parentheses here. Now, how do I know that x goes here and here? Well, think about it. X squared. How do I get x squared? Well, I take x times x, right? X times x is x squared, which is why your binomials in your parentheses are going to both start with a single x, okay? And then you get to fill in these numbers right here and here. Positive 3 and a negative 5. Positive 3 we show as plus 3. Negative 5 we show as minus 5. So there you go. There's your answer. Okay. Now, I'm hoping you're like, ugh, how do I know if that's right? Well, what's cool is you can always check. You can always check to see if you factored right. How you would check, write this in your notes, please. How you would check is you would check by foiling it. Okay. You check by foiling it. So if we take x plus 3 and times it by x minus 5, let's go ahead and FOIL that out. X times x is x squared. X times negative 5 is negative 5x. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. You combine your like terms. Negative 5 plus 3 is negative 2, so that makes negative 2x. And then drop down to negative 15. Okay, so we got this. So that's how you would check, is you would take what you factored out and see if it actually multiplies down to what you started with. Okay, so this takes practice, it really does. So that's what we're gonna do. Okay, practice. Next step. Number 1, we got x squared plus 11x plus 18. Okay, so here is what we're trying to search for. And maybe let's write that like up here, wherever you can fit. So our thought bubble to ourselves is need to find 2 numbers that multiply to, and then you always want them to multiply to that number at the end, multiply to positive 18, but add to, and they need to add to the coefficient of your middle term, add to 11. Okay, so that's what we're trying to find. Now, the whole point of doing that little X game on delta was to show you how I tend to set up my work. Okay, sometimes I write the factor list off to the side, but I most definitely use that little X, just like what you saw in delta. So I want you to set up kind of a big X right here. We want 2 numbers that multiply to 18, but add to 11. So we're trying to figure out what 2 numbers do that, okay? Doing a little factor list off to the side is probably going to be helpful for most of you. So I say we do that, factors of 18, okay? Now we got to be smart with our factors here. We want it to equal positive 18. So we know positive times positive is positive, but also negative times negative is a positive, okay? So you got to keep that in mind. Negative times negative is a positive. So these 2 numbers could potentially be negative, but in this specific problem, these numbers wouldn't both be negative because when I add 2 negatives together, I get a bigger negative, okay? And since they're adding to a positive value, it's going to be a positive times a positive, okay? So now let's think of how we can make 18. I always start with just like 18 and 1. I know 2 times 9, or I mean, you can flip that around, 1 and 18, right? 2 times 9 and 3 and 6. 3 times 6 is 18. Once again, technically, negative 18 and negative 1, negative 2 and negative 9, negative 3 and negative 6 are also factors of positive 18. But when you add two negatives, you end up getting a bigger negative, and you actually want them to add to be a positive. So it's got to be one of these combos. So which one of these matches over here end up being 11 when you add them together? I'm hoping you're saying 2 and 9. Okay, so 2 and 9 are your special numbers here. All you do is you set up your parentheses here. You start with your x values out front, and then you place in positive 2, so plus 2, and positive 9. That's your answer. Okay. Obviously, I want you to check at least the next couple. So how you check is you take your answer that you got and you FOIL it out and you see if you end up with this. Okay, go ahead and pause the video and try that out. Make sure that you actually end up getting it. So here we go. X times x is x squared. X times 9 is 9x. 2 times x is 2x. 2 times 9 is 18. I combine these like terms. 2 plus 9 is 11, so it's 11x. And oh my goodness gracious, that is what our starting polynomial was. Okay, so that's how we do it. Let's try another one, number 2. X squared minus x minus 6. Okay, if it helps you to write this out every time, then you can write it out. For me, I just use the x to do that. So I kind of tell myself, okay, I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 6, but they add up to negative 1. Yeah, okay. So we're looking for those two numbers, factors of negative 6. So off to the side, I'm going to do my little factors. Okay, so how can we multiply to get negative 6? The key right here is that it has to end up as negative 6. Positive times negative is going to help us get there, or negative times positive. One of them has to be positive, one of them has to be negative, okay? So like 6 and 1, but 6 times 1 is positive 6. So like if we make that one negative, that would work. We could also do positive 6 and negative 1. The only other factors of 6 are 2 and 3. So maybe negative 2 and positive 3, positive 2 and negative 3. So those are the only things we can multiply to end up getting negative 6 as the product. Now we need to see what happens when we add these together. So if it helps, get a calculator. Negative 6 plus 1 is negative 5. 6 plus negative 1 is positive 5. Negative 2 plus 3 is 1. 2 plus negative 3 is negative 1. Okay, so we're trying to get this to add up to negative 1. And I forget if I said this, but we all know that there's a secret 1 there, right? That's how I got the negative 1. Okay, so this is the only one, 2 and negative 3. Those are the only numbers that multiply to negative 6, but add up to negative 1. So those are your winners right there. Positive 2 and negative 3. Now, could you write it as negative 3 and positive 2? Yeah. The 2 needs to be positive and the 3 needs to be negative. So then we go to write our binomials over here. X goes out front. You fill in a positive 2, so plus 2, and a negative 3. Okay. And I do want you to do another check just to make sure you understand how to check your answer, because you'll need to on your test. Okay. So x plus 2 times x minus 3. Pause the video, make sure you know how to do that. X squared, negative 3x, positive 2, negative 6. Negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1x, or just negative x. Okay, so that's what we get. All right. So on these, we're going to do 2 more. Try to fit 2 more in our notebooks here. If you want to check it, you totally can. If you don't, that's on you. Okay. But I'd like you to pause the video and really try to do it on your own. Okay. Or else, when are you going to learn? Right. So pause the video, try to do it, and then check your answer by playing it. Okay. So here we go. X squared minus 10x plus 24. So like the whole thing, set up your X thing, try to do the whole thing. Hit pause, try it out. Okay, let's check what you put in your little X. We want, oops, this is times. We want 2 numbers that multiply to positive 24 and add to negative 10. So I'm looking for 2 numbers. Multiply to positive 24. But when I add them up, I get a negative 10. So positive numbers, I can do positive times positive. I can also do a negative times a negative. And if I look at what I want them to add to, I want them to add to a negative value. Positive plus positive is positive. So that means that these 2 numbers have to both be negatives, because 2 negatives being multiplied is positive. 2 negatives being added just ends up being a bigger negative. Okay. So when I'm listing my factors of 24, I'm going to make sure I list them as both negative values. Okay, so like negative 24 and negative 1, 12, negative 12 and negative 2, negative 8 and negative 3, negative 6 and negative 4. Okay, those would be my factors. Okay, so which ones add up to negative 10? That is the question here. And that would be these. Negative 6 times negative 4 is positive 24. Negative 6 plus negative 4 is negative 10. So my final answer is x minus 6 times x minus 4. Okay. Do one more. X squared minus 10x minus 24. Those look awfully similar, right? Okay. Okay. On this one, keep in mind, when you do your little X thing and your factors, you want them to multiply to be negative. That means one has to be negative, one has to be positive. Okay. So you're going to kind of have a longer list of factors here. Pause the video, try it out. Okay. Okay, factors of negative 24. So I could do 24 times negative 1. I could also do negative 24 times positive 1. Okay, so both of those end up being negative 24 when I multiply them. I can do 12 with negative 2 or negative 12 with positive 2. I can do 8 with negative 3 or negative 8 with positive 3. I can do 6 with negative 4 or -6 with +4. So you have a lot of different combinations to choose from. You're trying to see which ones of those end up being -10 when you add them. If you chose 6 and 4, because that's what we did on the last problem, that wouldn't work. -6 plus 4 is -2. +6 minus 4 plus -4 is +2. Okay, this one's -2, this one's +2. Either way, I want -10. 8 and 3, that's either going to be 5 or it's going to be 11. Okay, or -5, -11. So it's one of these, the 12 and the 2. Okay, so we want this to be -10. If I chose 12 and -2, that's like 12 minus 2, that's +10. So it's actually going to be this one right here, -12 with a +2. So my final answer here is x minus 12 and x plus 2. Okay? Okay, so we'll do the little X game for practice, and then also just ones that you can type in your answer and make sure you get it. Okay? Okay, thanks for watching. See you guys last lesson. Woo, woo, woo.